Welcome one and all to the Hammer Territory Podcast. My name is Shawn Coleman. Hope wherever you are and wherever you are listening that you have had a great week so far. It was an off day for the Braves, and you know what? I hope that they had an enjoyable off day. Coming off a series win against the White Sox, been playing good ball over the past 2 weeks. Some good offensive results here recently as well. A lot of good things happening for the Braves. But even though they didn't play today, there's still plenty, and I mean plenty to talk about, as plenty of news was revealed on Thursday when it came to the Braves. And here to break it all down with me, as always, is my podcast partner, Stephen Tolbert. Stephen, good talking with you, sir. Hope all is well on your end.
What's up, buddy? It was obviously no game on the field today, but it was not a quiet day in Braves country. There was a lot. It's almost like the team knew we had a podcast to do tonight. It was like, you know what? We're going to throw Steven and Shawn a bone. We're going to drop like 20 different bits of news. Some of it pretty significant that impacts, could impact this year and next year. Some roster moves, like 3 or 4 roster moves, actually. And then obviously we've got some national stuff happening with all of this expansion talk that we're going to get into the second half of the show. So yeah, off day today, but quite a bit to talk about.
Absolutely. And let's get right into it with the biggest news of the day. And I think that it was news that many kind of had prepared themselves for, though it's not the most ideal outcome when it comes to Austin Riley. Let's set the stage here a little bit. If we go back to July 9th, I believe it was July 9th, maybe it was July 11th, against the Cardinals, Austin Riley exited a game in St. Louis. It was the series right before the All-Star break with an abdominal injury. He went through his duration, that stint of the 10, 11 days that he was on the IL, came back, I believe, for about a week, maybe less than a week, and wound up re-injuring himself again on the race to home plate, I believe, with Ellie De La Cruz, in the game at Bristol. But all that to say, Riley had been on the IL once again now for about 3 weeks. Well, this week he tried to ramp up his baseball activity. He still felt some discomfort. Went and consulted with the doctor, and it wound up being that he needed core muscle surgery. I don't want to speculate too much. Some have alluded to it was to repair a sports hernia. Whatever the details are, I'm sure that'll come out in time. But the biggest takeaway is this. He did have surgery. He's out for the season, and the Braves do expect him back for spring training. So that's at least good news. The thing that stands out is that this does not seem to really be something that'll impact him in terms of health going into the 2026 season. But that aside, Stephen, this is impactful because it's just one more disappointing development for Austin Riley, both in terms of performance as well as health. The past 2 seasons certainly continue to bring up more concern than confidence when it comes to Austin Riley long term. I think there's a very good shot we're going to see Austin Riley be himself once again, but that's not to say there's not reason to be concerned on multiple levels right now when it comes to his outlook for 2026 and beyond.
Yeah, so, obviously core surgery is very vague. It's intentionally vague. Obviously everybody connected it to a sports hernia. We're not going to speculate. It's not fair. But, it's not like, so Dansby Swanson had this same surgery last offseason. Mitch Haniger had this same surgery a couple of, like 3 or 4 off seasons ago. The timeline is always the same. It's always like 6-8 weeks. And obviously where we are in the calendar, it really doesn't anything more than 3 or 4 weeks was probably going to knock Austin out the rest of the year, just how much he was had already missed. And because we're so, it's so long until we get to 2026 that none of this is going to really affect him for 2026. So, it basically just means we're not going to see Austin in 2025 anymore. And honestly, with every update that we got about this injury, where like every time Austin Riley was on the field, it was like, nope, still hurt. Nope, still feeling it. Nope. Like the writing was on the wall that we probably weren't going to see Austin again this year anyway. So I don't know how much today's news was, even shocking or, I don't know how well people have followed it, but yeah, like you said, we pretty much expected it. And it does kind of just cap a really disappointing year for him. And we're just going to have to see. We'll have to see what he looks like in 2026. I have no doubt that he should be 100% healthy by the time we get to spring training, unless something else crops up. It is a little concerning that it's something that he kept like re-aggravating. It could just be a fluke thing. That play at home plate with Ellie De La Cruz in the Speedway Classic was a really unusual looking play. Like, it's not a play that happens a lot. Third basemen don't typically like do an all out sprint like that. I'm not actually sure I've ever seen that play before, to be honest with you. So I don't know how like concerning this is long term. But as far as this specific injury, it shouldn't affect him for 2026. He'll be back 100% by spring training. And, it's going to be a big year. I mean, we'll say it all offseason, but it is going to be a massive year for Austin Riley. Again, as the recipient of the biggest contract in the history of the franchise. And, it's been a disappointing 2 years for him, both on the field and off the field. So, 2026 is going to be a big year.
Absolutely. And of course, we won't get too in-depth about what to make all of the past 2 years with Austin Riley, what needs to change to get him back to where he was in 21 through 23 when he had 3 straight seasons of top 7 MVP finishes. We'll have all offseason to discuss that. What I think is a bit more pertinent right now, though, is what's going to happen in his absence when it comes to the third base position. And the obvious answer is we're going to get to see an extended look of Nacho Alvarez. Scott and I talked about that on Tuesday. If it came to this, where Riley was going to be out for the rest of the year, Nacho Alvarez getting an extended look, definitely can see that being a positive. He's heated up with the bat. He definitely seems to be able to pick it at third base defensively. My opinion of Nacho Alvarez has improved because of how well he's played so far, and maybe he could carve himself out of being a bench piece for the Braves in 2025. Another thing I wouldn't mind seeing, getting Eli White a few looks over there. We heard about Eli White being, increasing his versatility as a guy that can play all over the diamond. Could he potentially get a couple of looks over there? Just different bodies at third base, seeing what they can do. The Braves should take full advantage of that, but the main focus is getting former top prospect Nacho Alvarez the opportunity to get an extended look and really see, number one, if he can show that he can stick in the majors and be a somewhat reliable source of offense, because I really think that's where the questions remain with his outlook.
Yeah, it's all about his bat. I mean, if he wants any chance at being a consistent everyday player, like, Nacho's going to have to hit more. He's got a really good glove at third base, but you can't play third base if you can't hit, quite honestly. So, we've talked about before about how important offense is at these corner positions. You can be a utility player, you can be a bench player, but if he has dreams of being an everyday regular at third base, and that looks like kind of his best defensive position, then he's going to have to hit substantially more than he has. So, he'll get run. He'll get about 6 weeks to run here, and he can make an impression, at the very least, maybe secure a bench spot for next year. But yeah, with Austin gone, you're going to see a lot of Nacho Alvarez the last 6 weeks. And you're muted.
Again, we're going to talk plenty about Austin Riley as time goes on. But again, I want to hit on this point, Stephen, and agree or disagree. The one thing that I will end with when it comes to Austin Riley and his outlook, I don't know if there is a bigger swing source or swing stat, I guess you could say, but there's not a bigger development, I feel, for the Braves to get back to being the contender we all hope that they can be, than Austin Riley getting back to his old self. That really has to happen for this offense to get the consistency that it needs, for the overall investment that this team has made in its core to be where it needs to be, and just in general with, how important Austin Riley is to this team on the field, off the field, what have you. When he's playing well, this team is playing well, and that's got to be a big key factor. Really seeing him be able to get back to himself is going to be a major swing factor in the Braves getting back to being a true contender for years to come. You have to hope, even if he's not healthy all off season, he figures it out this off season going into spring training.
Yeah, I mean, I can make the argument that the single biggest number for the Braves offense, or for any one player on the Braves offense, is Austin Riley's slugging percentage.
Yeah.
Like, he's a slug first guy. He's never been an on-base guy, really. I mean, he's not a huge walk guy. He's always lived in like the 330s on base, but he lives off that slugging percentage, man. Doubles and homers. And when he's like a 500 slug guy, he's an MVP level player. But we've watched his slugging percentage literally the last 4 years. I mean, it's a terrifying trend, quite honestly, of just it dropping and dropping and dropping and dropping and dropping. And so, yeah, with Austin, you can honestly look at one number. I mean, you could literally just look at his slugging percentage on a given day, and I could tell you exactly the kind of season he's having. So yeah, getting back to that power, hitting balls over the fence, hitting balls in the gap. That is the key to Austin Riley. And in a lot of ways, Austin Riley is the key to the offense. So, you can make the case that literally that one number is the biggest number for the Braves' entire offense.
Absolutely. And the big thing is that nobody knows that more than Austin Riley. So, we talk about, like we talk about Spencer Strider, his development this offseason, him getting back to his normal self. On the offensive side, the equivalent is Austin Riley. And you certainly hope that sooner rather than later, we see that old production come back for a guy who clearly has shown he can be one of the best bats in the National League and also at third base. But speaking of bats, let's talk a little bit about some of the Braves bats as we look at the draw. You have seen this edition on plenty of the shows throughout each week that we've done Hammer Territory. This is the part of the show where we really look into some Braves that can make you some money. That's the big thing here, is the opportunity for you to be able to make some money off of your favorite players, whether they're Braves, whether they're not Braves, whomever they may be. Pick Six allows for you to really be able to get into the action and pick which hitters, which pitchers you feel are going to have the most successful days. We are sponsored today by Pick Six, the Pick Six app from DraftKings. All you have to do is pick more or less on the stats for two or more of your favorite players, and you're in the mix for cash prizes. Now, Steven, let's get into this a little bit when it comes to the Braves. The Braves starting the series with the Mets tomorrow. We know that the Braves have played very well against the Mets this year. Who are you feeling? Are there a couple of hitters more than others who you feel could really be options for those who like to play the DraftKings Pick Six to choose to make some money over the weekend?
Yeah, so we obviously went on and we just looked through the list of names to see, what matchups felt good. So Jerkson Profar, more or less, we put more. He's at 0.5 homers. So we took Jerkson Profar. I mean, Profar has just been as hot as anybody. Obviously, going against a right-handed pitcher, the Mets are starting on Friday night, a rookie. So Jerkson Profar, more than 0.5 homers. And then I took Ronnie. I took Acuna. Acuna has not hit a homer since he's been back. He usually hits really well against the Mets. He usually hits really well in that park. I'm going to say Acuna gets his first home run since coming back. Again, we're picking more. He's at 0.5 homers on DraftKings. So we're doing more homers on Acuna, more homers on Profar. And hopefully all of that together leads to a Braves win.
Absolutely. It's always good when you can enjoy your favorite players a bit more by them contributing to a win for the Braves on the field, but also contributing to you and your bank account, getting a few extra dollars off the field. And I think that these are good picks, Steven. You're picking someone who is proven to be that he's kind of on a hot streak in Jerkson Profar, but also picking someone in Ronald Acuna Jr. who's due. And I think that's a good strategy for this Pick Six formula when it comes to DraftKings. Pick players who are hot, but also pick players who are due. And it's always good to pick players who could have some real success against a Braves rival.
Yeah, and again, Acuna is Acuna is just always one swing away from getting crazy red hot. Again, he hits the Mets very well. Wouldn't surprise me at all to see Acuna hit multiple homers in one of these games, quite honestly. But as hot as Profar's been, you could obviously go with Michael Harris, Matt Olson. There's a lot of ways you could go here. For tonight's, for Friday night's game, we went Ronnie and Profar for a couple of homers.
And the great thing about it is that you could play this all weekend long when it comes to the Braves or your favorite players outside of the Braves, your favorite WNBA players, your favorite NFL players, what have you, you will be able to make the most of it. You just pick a lineup of your favorite players, more or less when it comes to certain stats, and you are in the game yourself when it comes to making a few extra bucks off the success of your favorite players. And don't forget, when it comes to DraftKings, you need to download the Pick Six app right now. And if you use code FOUL, that's code FOUL, new customers play $5 and get $50 in bonus picks instantly. Ride the upside where a few bucks can turn into a bag only on DraftKings Pick Six. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick Six not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. One per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick Six bonus picks that expire in 14 days. 8/24/25 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. Terms at picksix.draftkings.com/promos.
So, Stephen, obviously, we talked about Austin Riley, but that just was one part of the day. As a matter of fact, the Braves, in typical Braves fashion, the most impactful or biggest news was actually the second or third tweet of the thread. But the first tweet of the thread that also made news today was the fact that the Braves has made several roster moves. Now, bear with me for a few hours as I go through this, all kidding aside. Just real quickly going to read through the moves by the Braves. Of course, the big move of the day was the fact that the Braves claimed familiar name Cal Quantrill from the Marlins. That certainly is a move that I think that many kind of looked at and they're thinking, okay, is this another Braves move where they are potentially going after a pitcher that they feel at the very least could give them some more innings this year? Or is this an arm that perhaps they feel they may be able to get some value out of? And could he be someone that could be available for them in 2026? I'm not sure off the top of my head if he has control. But, Stephen, before I get into the other moves that were made, what are your thoughts on the pickup of Cal Quantrill? I know that's a name, again, that many have seen around. He's been on many teams throughout his career. But the pickup of Cal Quantrill, just something for this year to help eat innings? Or are you intrigued for what he potentially could provide for 2026 and beyond?
I'm almost 90% sure this is just a innings eater guy, especially if the Braves end up, shutting down any of their starters. Quantrill is a free agent at the end of the year, so I don't think there's any long-term. And listen, he's 31, I think. He's got an ERA in the 5s the last 3 years combined. He was quite awful with the Marlins. I think this is just I think it's an arm to help get through the end of the season. Again, we've talked about would not be stunned at some point if they shut down Spencer Strider. Would not be stunned at some point if they shut down Hurston Waldrop. The Braves certainly don't need to push those guys any more than they absolutely want to. And, you just need arms. This is I'm not going to say this is Carlos Carrasco because obviously Carrasco was quite bad, but it has a potential of being Carlos Carrasco where you're just literally you're throwing a guy out there for a handful of games just to get innings, results be damned, and we'll see what happens. He is a guy that has pedigree, like he's been around for a while. He's kind of a well-known name. He's had a pretty good run of success in Cleveland, but he's never been able to find it again. The Braves are one of those organizations that usually get the most out of arms, though. So, I would have said all this stuff about Joey Wentz a few weeks ago, as well. And we've seen what Joey Wentz did. So if you told me right now that Cal Quantrill was going to come to Atlanta and have some success, it wouldn't stun me. I mean, this is kind of what, Rick Kranitz and company do with journeyman arms. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I mean, this could easily be he makes, he's immediately going to be in the action this weekend for the Braves. He could make a start or two and then, potentially be on the move, less than, a week from now. So to your point, that's probably what it is. And also to your point, you've got Waldrop, you've got Spencer Strider. When Sale comes back, I don't necessarily anticipate him making 4 or 5 more starts. So yes, it's eating the innings, more of an Eric Fetty type addition than, maybe a Joey Wentz who could figure into the mix in 2026 in some shape, form, or fashion. But again, this was just one of the moves that the Braves made today as they got Cal Quantrill off waivers from the Miami Marlins. They optioned Dane Dunning to AAA. They also reported Jake Fraley, who they, claimed earlier this week, and optioned to Connor Siebold back to Gwinnett following Wednesday night's game, they recalled Dylan Dodd and placed Luke Williams on the 10-day injured list, backdated to August 19th with a strained left oblique muscle. Now, of all those names that I mentioned, none of them really are long-term fixtures in Atlanta, but plenty of roster shuffling for the Braves. I am intrigued by them bringing Dylan Dodd back to Atlanta. Obviously, Luke Williams going on the IL if we get blown out or blow out a team. Who's going to pitch the 8th or 9th inning? That's also a big loss, no pun intended. But the point is that the Braves were just doing a lot of roster shuffling today, but nothing really of note that's going to impact this year significantly or beyond when it comes to all of today's roster moves.
Yeah, I mean, out of everybody moved today, Jake Fraley is the most talented guy. Dylan Dodd probably has an argument there. But Fraley is like a proven major league caliber outfielder. He's got a career WRC plus in the 100. I think it's a 102 or something like that. So like if you told me right now that Jake Fraley, he does have team control, the Braves would have to, I think they would have to tender him a contract and pay him like $4 million. But he technically does have team control next year. So I would guess this is going to be a bit of a tryout. Fraley's always been pretty good against right-handed pitching. He can't not hit lefties for crap. But he's always been decent against right-handed pitching. He's a decent defensive outfielder, got a little bit of speed. You can do worse as a 4th or 5th outfielder. The Braves famously have no outfielders, ever. They always are kind of dumpster diving in the middle of the season for outfielders. I think this tells you where Jared Kelenic is on the pecking order. The fact that, Fraley's already jumped above him. So it wouldn't stun me if Fraley showed some stuff that if he was around again next year on the bench. But yeah, mostly just, moving around the deck chairs a little bit. Luke Williams, everybody made the joke today that, the Braves pitching keeps getting hurt, and Luke Williams is the latest example of the pitching getting hurt. So, a strained oblique. The only surprising part was it wasn't a 60-day IL trip, I guess. But now that they have Quantrill, I'm guessing Quantrill is probably gonna. No, he's going in the rotation. They did add Dylan Dodd back, so they'll have some blowout relief, if they need it. But I think pretty clearly Jake Fraley is the most interesting name among all the moves today.
Absolutely. And on a non-injury front, at least in terms of, an injury update for this season, there was another revelation when it came to Reynaldo Lopez. Now, of course, Lopez threw, I believe, 5 innings in one start this year, and then unfortunately went under a procedure when it came to his throwing shoulder, and he's going to be out for the rest of the year. So it's kind of a lost season for Reynaldo Lopez. But Mark Bubble of MLB.com talked about the fact that Reynaldo Lopez has made it clear he has no intention of potentially going into the bullpen next season. His full focus is going to be on being in the rotation. And I think that's great. No, that's awesome. That's his focus. And with the Braves being on the hook for about $15 million for him next year, that would be the most valuable outcome when it comes to Reynaldo Lopez. But the only thing that kind of strikes me is that, Stephen, I'll let you elaborate on this a little bit. I'm perfectly fine with him going after a rotation spot because he was highly effective last year, but I would much rather have him healthy as a member of this staff as a whole than someone who potentially, once again, is an injury risk next year in the rotation. So I get his mentality. I understand where he's coming from, but if I was him, I also would definitely keep open the idea of being a part of the bullpen because he could be a good arm in the bullpen as well. But more than anything, just need for him to be healthy.
Yeah, listen, when you miss an entire season with a shoulder problem, and I know he pitched in the first week of the season, but Ronaldo effectively missed the entire season with his shoulder problem. And, when that happens, you got to get healthy before we ever start worrying about what your role is going to be. And listen, they did pay him. They owe him, I think they owe him, I have to go back and look. I think they owe him $30-40 million, something like that, the rest of this contract. They paid him like a starting pitcher. And I'm sure they're going to want to put him in the rotation to try to extract as much value out of him. But when you miss an entire season with shoulder problems, what your role is going to be in 2026, that question is a distant second to just, are you going to be around and contributing some way in 2026? And so, Like, I know this is going to be a thing where people talk about, they've got so many arms in the rotation. Does one of them go to the bullpen? That never matters. There's always injuries. There's always some sort of, you just need so much depth in the rotation. I'm fine if he starts. He was really good last year when he was healthy, but until he gets healthy and on the mound, I'm not going to spend a lot of energy caring about debating what his role should or is going to be, because that's kind of putting the, not to put too fine a point on it, but that's kind of putting the bullpen cart ahead of the horse. We got to get the guy healthy. And so, that's where he's got to be. Again, it's a shoulder. It's terrifying. It's terrifying. Got to get him healthy.
Yeah, and again, I want him to have that mentality. I want his focus to be on being in the.
Yeah, I had no problem with what he said.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. But definitely, be open. Whatever can keep him healthy to the point that because again, a healthy Reynaldo Lopez, I think, is a trustworthy arm that could work through an opposing playoff lineup in the playoffs. That's what the Braves need. That is something that they have sorely lacked since the 21 World Series, is depth of options on the pitching side. I know their biggest issue in the playoffs has been the offense, but it's also been the depth of options on the pitching side that could legitimately go through an opposing playoff lineup confidently at least one time through, not to mention multiple times through. They need as many of those options healthy for future playoff runs. Reynaldo Lopez can be that, so I'm all for what keeps him healthy for potentially being in that spot. But we're talking about the Braves, and we're talking about the future and what that could look like for Atlanta. But what about Major League Baseball as a whole? Commissioner Rob Manfred had some interesting thoughts and comments when it comes to the future outlook of the majors as a whole. Recently, during the Little League or MLB game, I believe it was between the Mariners and the Astros, Stephen and I are actually going to expand our thoughts on the idea of expansion right after this word from our partners.
Okay, Kratz, I opened up Arena Club, put my own money in there, and I wasn't going to go big. I know we went over the Ruby pack a week ago. This time, I just went for the low-level pack, where it's an easy entry point, $25. You can get yourself a big boy card. The Grail has many good options. I slice open the pack. We're looking at it if you're watching us right now, and I pull a card from the 1950s. Super cool. I enjoyed the experience looking at it. It's Jim Gilliam. It's a top set from the mid-50s. It's cool. It's a Brooklyn Dodger, but it's worth more than the card. Like I said, I'm going to sell it back. I got $28 instantly, so I can buy another one of those packs and try and get what I want.
Absolutely. The excitement, I heard Kip say it before, the excitement's in the chase. You sold it back. Now you get to open another one. I enjoy when you slide it across the screen there and the pack opens.
You know where to go. arenaclub.com/foul. 20% off your first slab pack or card purchase. Get after it.
Stephen, as we were watching the latest word from our partners, and I was looking at a highlight of Boston Red Sox outfielder Roman Anthony, who just seems like an absolute stud. He hit a ball a mile, in his first game in Yankee Stadium. But I bring that up because I know many in Braves country aren't just fans of the Braves and their rivalries. They're fans of Major League Baseball as well. And it's so much fun seeing Drake Baldwin and what the impact he's making as a Brave. We obviously know what the future could look like with Ronald Acuna Jr., but seeing the rookies that are in the American League, there's a lot of fun when it comes to the product of Major League Baseball moving forward. And for that reason, the idea of expansion makes things even more exciting. The game going into new markets, even more talent coming into the fold when it comes to the league. The idea of expansion is always one that's fun to speculate about. And Rob Manfred seemed to do more than speculate. He seemed to basically put it out there. This is certainly something in the near future we're going to see become more and more of a likelihood. But the reason I want to bring it up here is because the one team in Major League Baseball that could potentially be impacted the most by the idea of expansion is the Braves. Stephen, you want to elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah. So expansion is coming. Like, it's not even an if. It's just a when. When do they get all, it's a whole process. You got to, two cities have to win the bid and stadium contracts and all this stuff. It is a process, but expansion is coming. the MLB has made it very clear over the years they want to get to 32 teams, and they want to kind of move more to a 8 division, 4 teams per division format, again like the NFL. So division is coming, or excuse me, expansion is coming. What's going to be interesting is when it comes, where do these new teams go? The general consensus has been forever that they're going to put another team in the Southeast and they're going to put another team in the Northwest. And, it's very easy to just say Portland and Charlotte, or Salt Lake City and Nashville, or something like that. But that's what I think it's going to end up being. The reason it's so impactful for the Braves is because they have operated for decades as the only team in the southeastern footprint of the United States. And I don't really know how they've managed to pull that off. I don't know how they've thwarted off any sort of other team from coming literally anywhere else in the footprint, but they have. And it actually doesn't make any sense that there's only one team in the Southeast. There needs to be two. I mean, it's such a massive region of the country. There's millions and millions and millions and millions of people that live here. By far and away, I mean, easily can support more than one team. So the fact that another team is probably coming to the Southeast, that is going to cut into the Braves market. Now, typically teams do get compensated for that. Like, obviously, when there's talk of expansion and, markets get impacted, teams push back and they ask for concessions, and all of that's part of the negotiation. But 100% the Braves are going to be impacted by this, because there's going to be another team. Right now, the closest team to the Braves is the Cincinnati Reds by miles, which is crazy. Cincinnati's in Ohio, and that's the closest team to the Atlanta Braves in terms of distance. That's going to change. There's going to be a team in Nashville. There's going to be a team in Charlotte. There's going to be a team somewhere in the southeastern footprint. And the interesting thing is going to be when that happens, when they add these two teams, how do they then configure the divisions? And this is what everybody wants to talk about, right? Every time you see a podcast, they've got the map up. They got all the teams, they got the logos. They're drawing circles. These 4 teams could be together, and these 4 teams. And then once you have the teams, you have to configure the leagues. Who's going to be in the National League? Who's going to be in the American League? How is it all going to play? There's endless possibilities. There's some very clear geographical, ideas in terms of like the Braves being with the new expansion team, plus being with the Marlins and the Rays. Just geographically, that makes sense. Obviously Braves fans would absolutely the Braves would run that division like it's a high school division. The Rays go up and down, but the Marlins, no one's worried about the Marlins. It usually takes these expansion teams years to get off the ground. So Braves fans would love that. There's talk of like in the northeastern corner, putting the Yankees and the Mets and like the Red Sox and Phillies. I don't know if you could put those like massive organizations all in one division, but that's what I'm talking about. Like, there's so many variations of this stuff, and that's where it's going to get interesting. And that's where a lot of the conversation has happened the last, a week since Manfred said all this, is everybody's, playing around with the map, trying to draw these divisions. So I don't know if you have an opinion on these divisions, but that's where the conversation gets interesting.
Absolutely. And I don't see Major League Baseball having the divisions like that. What I mean by that is that I think that they would see too much of an opportunity to where you would be too top heavy in one division, where it would be the 2 New York teams, Boston and Philly, or even if it's Toronto, who's in a big market as well. That would be a very top heavy division. And then you have the Southeastern division, where it's one of your marquee organizations in the Braves, and then 3 others, who are not marquee, for lack of a better way of putting it. I don't necessarily think that Major League Baseball would find benefit in that. So while it would be great in terms of future outlook for the Braves, I'm just not too confident that would happen.
And I do want to point out, the reason people are doing that is because Manfred specifically said it would give us the ability to realign geographically. He actually used the word geographic in his quote. And so obviously what everybody has done is go to a map and just circle all the teams that are as close together as possible. That's where all that's come from.
Yeah, and while I think baseball would want that ideally to work out, I don't necessarily know if strategically for the best of the sport, for the competitive strategy of the sport, it would make the most sense. And I think that at the end of the day would win out. The other thing that I'll say is this: is that Charlotte or Nashville, if one of them got a team, I think the city bases there of Charlotte and Nashville could support a major league organization. But I also don't think that it would be something that would just absolutely be a big threat to what the Braves have in the South. I think if you had a Nashville or a Charlotte, their fan base outlook would be more like what you have with Cincinnati. It would be that local region. Now, speaking as being someone who's been born and raised in Tennessee, West Tennessee has been Cardinals country for so many years. Central and East Tennessee has been Braves country. That's the thing about it, is that if you put it, for instance, in Nashville, you're getting close to an area of the country where you've got the Cubs that are in the upper Midwest, you've got the St. Louis Cardinals that are in the central and southern Midwest, and you've got the Braves in the South. So yes, there is room for another team, and I think that Nashville could support that, a franchise, for instance, but I don't think overall the impact would take away from what the Braves have, and that what we're talking about more on that end is what we've all been discussing, the financial outlook for this team. Will it stay as beneficial as it's been? I think even if an expansion team lands in Charlotte or Nashville, that would be just fine. But I'm here for expansion. Bring more teams into the fold. That means more talent is going to be in place. And that also means that you're going to see the opportunity for more rivalries to develop as well. So I'm here for it. I think it would be a lot of fun. But I also think that when we get closer to or get to the final product, it likely is going to be significantly different than what people are speculating on at the moment.
Yeah, and listen, I mean, where they end up putting these two teams is going to matter. Like, everyone is assuming a Southeastern team and a Northwestern team, but it's not necessarily locked in stone that that's what's going to happen. Just makes the most logical sense. I'm fine with expansion. I think it's a fun idea. The whole expansion draft where, these two teams kind of get to draft players from all the other teams would be a fascinating thing to cover in like real time. Which players is your team going to protect? Which players is your team going to leave open to this expansion draft? That would be a fascinating bit of content just to cover. I think the last expansion draft we had was when the Diamondbacks came? Shawn, you're better with the history stuff than I am.
Was it the Rays and Diamondbacks? I think that was it. I can't remember if there was an expansion draft. That was the last time that you had two teams. You had the Rockies and Marlins in 93, and then the Diamondbacks and the Rays in 98. I believe it was the Diamondbacks and the Rays, yeah. But yeah, that would have been the last time if it happened. I can't remember exactly what the details of the expansion draft look like.
Yeah. So that would be, I mean, just to have an expansion draft in like the modern era, the social media era of teams protecting players or not protecting players. My God, the takes and the content would just be absolutely flying. So it'd be entertaining. The thing I hate that I know is going to happen is that it's going to be any sort of expansion and realignment is also going to be wed with expanded playoffs. MLB is just trying to keep, they're trying to add as many playoff teams as possible because it makes them a ton of money. And listen, a lot of this is about money. It's about expanding TV reach. There's a reason, Scott and I talked about this. There's a reason all of these TV deals that MLB is negotiating, there's a reason all of this is coming out now. Like all of this is connected. They're trying to get more and more money into their pockets. And the easiest way for owners to do that is more playoff teams, because more playoff teams equals more races. It equals closer races down the stretch. It equals more playoff games. Networks love paying for playoff games because they do massive ratings. Advertisers love advertising playoff games because they do massive ratings. It's just more money. So I know expanded playoffs is going to be a part of this, which I can't stand. But every other part of expansion, I'm actually pretty excited about. I will say this. I do hope MLB, I hope they respect some of the history of the game. There are teams like the Braves and the Reds and the Phillies. These teams have been in the National League for so long. Like it would kind of piss me off, honestly, if they were like, all right, you're in the American League now. Like all of that history just kind of, I don't know, swept under the rug. There's obviously going to have to be some changes, and changes aren't necessarily bad. I just hope as they do it with more of a scalpel than like a machete. Let's have some grace with how we do this and be tactful about it and respect some of the history of this game that, has been around for 150 years.
Absolutely. And that's the thing about it is that, I know that 16 teams make the playoffs in NBA, and I know that the 14 teams make the playoffs in the NFL. Right now we're up to 12 teams in Major League Baseball. I know that they want to expand on that, but 12 seems like it's enough. But, obviously that's not going to be the case as we move forward. So it's really going to be interesting to see, how this develops. I know we're years away, even from, multiple years away, even from having an idea of where these teams are going to be. But if you're in Braves country, it certainly is a storyline to, put a pin on, because wherever they wind up, if a team winds up in the Southeast for multiple reasons, it could impact the future of the Braves in terms of their path, not only to the playoffs, but just in success in general moving forward. Steven, anything else from you as we wrap up this edition of the Hammer Territory podcast?
No, back on the field tomorrow. Start a series with the Mets. Joey Wentz on the mound. The Mets have one of their kind of prized young rookies, McLean, something like that. I don't know exactly how to pronounce his name, but he's on the mound for the Mets. Spencer Strider got pushed back. He's not going to pitch in this series. We are going to see Cal Quantrill pitch in this series. So, we'll see what happens. I'm not so sure that Cal Quantrill doesn't give the Braves a better chance to win right now than Spencer Strider, as crazy as that sounds. But go beat the Mets. The Mets just lost a series to the Nationals, which is hilarious. I was watching that game all day. They actually got drubbed by the Nationals. They lost like 9-3. Let's continue the misery for the Mets. Go win 2 out of 3. Maybe the Reds can steal that playoff spot and the Mets can miss the playoffs. That'd be entertaining as hell. But yeah, thanks for all the support as always, guys.
Yeah, hey, if they want to play spoiler, let's play spoiler and let's play the heck out of it. Obviously, one of the other development to watch is Chris Sale will be on the mound in Columbus over the weekend as well. Make sure to check out his start. Obviously, a successful start likely means that his next start would be with the Braves. So, hey, again, I know this has been a season that nobody really anticipated in a negative way, but at least right now we have more positives than probably many anticipated to talk about this time of year. Let's keep that ball rolling. And hey, if we can sit here and contribute to the Mets missing the playoffs, as Steven mentioned, I'd be all for that. Until next time, go Braves. You can find Steven Tolbert at B_outliers on Twitter, myself at StatsSAC on Twitter /X. Hammer Territory across all forms of social media, part of the Foul Territory family of podcasts. Until next time, go Braves. We'll talk to you again soon here on the Hammer Territory podcast.